When you think of Argentina, what comes to mind? Maybe endless plains, passionate tango, legendary football. But beneath all that, its story is one of the world's great paradoxes. It's a nation that seems to be perpetually caught between this incredible dream of what it could be and the often harsh reality of what it is.
So let's start with a really strange question. What if a whole country, was named for something it never actually had? Imagine your entire identity, your name on the map, being based on a treasure that, well, just wasn't there.
Well, the answer is right there in the name itself. Argentina comes from the Latin word for silver, argentum. You see, the first European explorers heard these incredible stories, legends of a Sierra de la Plata, a mountain range just overflowing with silver. The only problem? The silver was never found. It was just a story, a myth. And that one fact, a nation founded on a phantom treasure, it perfectly sets the stage for everything that follows. It's a story all about immense promise and a much, much harsher reality.
Okay, so if the silver was a myth, what was the real treasure? Well, it was the land itself. An absolutely unbelievable expanse of natural wealth that would go on to shape the country's entire destiny.
And just to give you a sense of the sheer scale we're talking about, Argentina is the 8th largest country on the planet. I mean, it stretches from the tropics all the way down to the subpolar regions of the south. This is a country built on an epic scale.
And it's not just big. The variety is staggering. You've got the towering Andes Mountains, creating this massive spine down the west. Then there are the incredibly fertile Pampas Plains that became the country's breadbasket. You've got the vast, wind-swept wilderness of Patagonia, and then these lush subtropical forests up in the north. This was the real silver. This was the foundation of the whole promise of Argentina.
And all that natural wealth, it translated directly into economic power. And for a while, boy, did it work. It worked spectacularly. Fueled by all those agricultural exports from the Pampas, Argentina became one of the wealthiest nations on Earth, per capita, in the early 20th century. We're talking top 10. It was a global powerhouse, a place that seemed to have limitless opportunity.
But of course, land is just land without people to work it. And that brings us to the next crucial chapter in this story, how the nation was built, almost from scratch, by one of the biggest waves of immigration in modern history.
Think about this. Between 1880 and 1950, the country was just completely transformed. More than 5 million Europeans landed on its shores, all of them drawn by that same promise of land and a new life.
And this wave of people totally reshaped the country's demographics. I mean, the population today is overwhelmingly of European descent. This wasn't just some small migration. This was the very making of the modern Argentine people.
And they really did come from everywhere. Sure, Italians and Spaniards were the biggest groups, but millions more came from all over Europe and the Middle East. We're talking Germany, Poland, Ireland, even the Arab nations of the Ottoman Empire. Each group brought their own traditions, their food, their dreams, and it all melted together into this new, totally unique Argentine identity.
But you know, this story of opportunity has a much darker side to it, a parallel story. Because as millions of Europeans arrived to build their new nation, the country's indigenous peoples faced a truly tragic fate. Their populations were devastated, they were pushed off their ancestral lands, and they became a marginalized minority. It's a really stark contrast, and you have to understand it to get the full, complex picture of Argentina's history.
But that golden age, that incredible prosperity, it didn't last. In fact, it gave way to a pattern that would define the next 100 years, this relentless cycle of political turmoil and economic crisis.
This timeline here gives you a quick snapshot of that instability. So, right after independence in 1816, you get decades of civil war. Then, in the mid-20th century, you have the rise of the incredibly powerful and controversial figure of Juan Perón. That was followed in 1976 by a brutal military dictatorship and its so-called Dirty War. And then, bam, in 2001, the country goes through the largest sovereign debt default in history up to that point. It's just this constant pattern, boom and bust, democracy and authoritarianism over and over again.
And these economic crises, they became chronic. This wasn't a one-off thing. In its history, Argentina has defaulted on its national debt a staggering 9 times. That number isn't just a statistic, it's a fundamental part of the national experience.
And you have to remember the human cost of these crises is just immense. That 2001 default wasn't just some abstract headline about finance. No way. It meant mass riots in the streets. It meant political chaos so bad they had 5 presidents in 2 weeks. It meant unemployment soaring to almost a quarter of the population.
Things like that leave deep, deep scars on a nation's soul.
So a question comes up. How does a nation even deal with a history like that? So much soaring hope followed by such crushing disappointment. Well, it pours all of that emotion into its culture. And there are two things in particular that really get to the heart of the Argentine soul: football and tango.
Yeah, from this really unique mix of immigration, promise, and pain, you get this culture of passionate and often kind of sad resilience. It's a culture that's all about high drama, deep emotion, and a really fierce pride.
And you can see this national character nowhere better than in these two things. Football, that's the public stage for all the collective drama, the genius, the heartbreak. It's the national passion, embodied by gods like Maradona and Messi. But then you have tango. And tango is the intimate, private expression of that exact same story. It was born in the immigrant ports of Buenos Aires, and it's a dance all about longing, nostalgia, love, and loss. So you have football, which is like a roar of hope, and tango, which is more like a sigh of melancholy. And both are just quintessentially Argentine.
So here we are, full circle. We have a nation born from a myth of silver that it never even had. It was built by millions of immigrants who were all searching for a promise. And it's been defined by this relentless cycle of crisis and resilience. All of that history has forged a unique, passionate, and profoundly complex identity. And it leaves us with one final big question. What is the next chapter in Argentina's long, long story of promise and paradox?